Here's a story, a real story. It's about a good friend of mine passed away, I guess, about 10 years ago, maybe even more. His name was Yisrael Landau. Yisrael Landau, he was a very, very simple Jew. It was a big question in my mind if he even knew how to read. And he used to work in the mikveh in Bnei Brak. He cleaned the mikveh. And he had a one beautiful family. Had a very few family. He married a nice woman. And he brought up a very family, despite the fact he was very simple. But to tell you about a little bit about his history is like this. His mother, when he was young, I guess 10 years old, his mother put him into an orphanage. His father passed away. His mother put him into an orphanage because she wanted to remarry. And she was afraid that if she had a child, that no one would marry her. So she put her into an orphanage. And the orphanage swore that he wouldn't have to work on Shabbat. They were like minimally religious. They were religious. They didn't want to work on Shabbat, but they did make him work. In fact, they did make him work on Shabbat, and she never really came to check up on him. So they made him work on Shabbat. So he didn't know what to do. He was a very simple child, very simple child. He wasn't, very, they say, intellectual, but he knew things weren't the way they were supposed to be, and he didn't want to work on Shabbat. He knew that it was not a good thing to work on Shabbat. So one day it happened to be that he saw, this is in the life of the previous Rebbe, this was before 1950. So he was a young boy, 10 years old, whatever. He saw a picture of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe in a newspaper. I guess a letter that was sent. The previous Rebbe used to send out letters to all the Jews. He would send out a general letter to all the Jews, and he would get printed in the papers. So he saw a picture of the Rebbe, and he took down the Rebbe's address, and he wrote a letter. And he asked somebody, put it in an envelope, and he asked someone to wrote a letter in English. And he said it, and he gave it to someone that he asked them to send the letter. One of the workers over there. In any case, they sent the letter out, and sure enough, he got an answer from the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said that I get your letter, and what you write about having to work on Shabbat. I was very sad to hear that, but you'll be out soon. You'll get out soon. So sure enough, when he was bar mitzvah, and almost immediately after he was bar mitzvah, they found him work outside of the orphanage. And little by little, he got more and more work outside of the orphanage until he was independent and he could live on his own. He would live on his own. So So the Rebbe said, you'll be out of the orphanage, and he was. So when he was about 15, 16 years old, so he saw meanwhile, the previous Rebbe passed away, and he became attached to the Rebbe, to the son-in-law of the Rebbe, became the seventh Rebbe of Chabad. So he saw that the Rebbe wanted that we should spread out Judaism. And he talked a lot about this, spreading out Judaism, ufaratzer, spreading out Judaism. That one Jew has to make another Jew. It's the first of the 10 commandments, the first commandment in the Torah. Be fruitful and multiply. That one Jew has to make another Jew. But he didn't know what to do. He couldn't really, and he used to talk with a stammer. He used to stutter. He was the stutter. He lived in Bnei Brak. He became a very good friend of mine. We became very good friends. And he told me this whole story. So he said that he didn't know what to do. So what he did was he went to a Chabad, maybe it was the 770. Anyway, he bought books. There were these pamphlets over there. I'll show you pamphlets like this. One second. Let me see if I can find one. See if I can find the pamphlet. Look at this. I can't find the pamphlets here. Okay, anyway, there were these little pamphlets. Let's see if I can find one. Here, like this. See? Pamphlets like this. Here we go. Here. There were pamphlets like these. See? Pamphlets like this pamphlet. Pamphlet is very short. They had how many pages in it? 50 pages, 70 pages. And they were written by the previous Rebbe explaining basic ideas in Chassidut, the oneness of God and the uniqueness of the Jewish people. So he bought three different ones on the learning of Chassidut and the teaching of Chassidut. So he bought three of them, and he put them together, and he took a cardboard from like the back of a shirt. When you buy a new shirt, and he bent the cardboard around, and he made like holes, and he made like a little pamphlet, and he wrote on the cover, Chassidut Chabad. Chassidut Chabad. So now there were these three pamphlets, and there was they had a cover on it. And he went to the library, the New York library, and he went to the Jewish section. He told me he went to the Jewish section, and he had this book, this thing hidden in his coat. And he went and he took out a book like he was reading it. And when he was reading, so he put his book on the next to this book, and he put them both back into the bookcase. And now his book was in the bookcase, and he left. And he said that was his doing ufrat, so spreading out Judaism. So he said about 5 years later, he had some job in Manhattan, and he would come back late at night on the subway, and he was sitting on the subway, and there was nobody else in the subway, just him, and there was another person sitting opposite him that had a little kippel on his head, a yarmulke on his head, a person without a beard, but he saw so he asked the person, are you Jewish? Yes, I'm Jewish. He said, where are you from? They started talking. He was a very friendly person, even though he had a stammer and he stopped, but he was very friendly. Where are you from? So this person said he lives in Borough Park or whatever. And he says, where do you live? In Crown Heights. He lived in Crown Heights. He said, oh, you live in Crown Heights? He said, yeah, that's Chabad, right? Yeah. He said, well, I'm not Chabad, but I became religious about 4 years ago because of Chabad. I said, really? He said, yeah. This fellow sitting opposite him said, yeah. He said, I was always interested in Judaism. I'm a Jew. I went to the New York Library, and I went to the Jewish section, books, and I took out a look at a book, and suddenly I saw that there was this weird sort of pamphlet there. I couldn't figure it. I pulled it out, and it didn't have like a pocket, where you're taking out of the library. It was a book that somebody must have stuck in there, and it said Chassidut Chabad. So I thought, this is pretty weird. So I opened it up. I started reading. There was 3 little pamphlets in there. I started reading, and it said some really interesting stuff. I didn't really understand much of what was written, but I understood that Jewish people are different from everybody else, and the Torah is different, and God is much closer than we think. And it was very interesting, And from that, I started getting interested in Judaism. So he said, this is Orlando said, see, I saw the fruits of my work. I saw that what I did, it paid off. It paid off. Right? I actually I made a Jew come closer to Judaism by means of my deeds, what he did. So it shows that you do a little bit, and now this fellow that he was talking to got married, and he has children, and the children also have children, and etc. And who knows how many tens, even hundreds of people, and each one of them also has an influence on others, were brought back to their true Jewish identity. Have a good day with Mashiach now.